Okay, well, that's a blessing and a pair of blessings. Bookend Vayechi, final chapter in the book of Bereshit, Genesis, and concluding the stories of Joseph and his father Jacob. On this hand, there is the the blessing rather, that aged, dying Yaakov gives to the grandchildren that he never knew he had, the two sons of Joseph. This is an illumination in a book that we've used often, the Golden Haggadah, a manuscript done in early 14th century Spain. Here's Yaakov, Yisrael, crossing his hands to bless Ephraim before firstborn Manasseh, a choice that Joseph questioned. Now in the collection of the British Museum, the Golden Haggadah was preserved in Italy and probably brought there by Jews expelled during the Spanish Inquisition. About 2 centuries later, Dutch master Rembrandt made this version of the scene. As with so much biblical art of that era, the settings, the wardrobe, the hairstyles all look much more like the artist's time. But Rembrandt does put a turban on Joseph's head to give it some Middle Eastern authenticity. Though not Jewish, Rembrandt lived in Amsterdam's Jewish quarter and used many neighbors as models for his biblical paintings. In this case, the patron who commissioned the painting, Willem Schrijver, is the model for Joseph, and his wife and their 2 sons, depicted as Joseph's wife Asenat and sons Ephraim and Manasseh. One of Rembrandt's pupils, Jan Victors, also painted the blessing of Joseph's sons in his portfolio of exclusively biblical scenes. A devout member of the Calvinist Dutch Reformed Church, Victors avoided showing Jesus or angels in his art, so many of his paintings are of Torah scenes, and he appears to be more generous with light than his mentor Rembrandt. While the setting and wardrobe are again anachronistic for the biblical era, there is a texture to the clothing and the furniture and the drapery and even Joseph's knee-high boots as he leans forward to question Jacob's choice of which son to bless first. Around that same time in Baroque-era Italy, here's Jacob blessing the sons of Joseph by Il Guercino, the signature of Giovanni Francesco Barbieri, a productive painter and draftsman who was commissioned to create altarpieces of biblical scenes for churches across Italy. He gives us an aged but still muscular Israel crossing his hands to bless Ephraim and Manasseh, with Joseph protesting over which hand belongs on the oldest son. Il Guercino's lighting is dramatic, with Jacob spotlit and Joseph in the shadows. Coming up to our century, Israeli artist Avner Moria gives a modern take on the blessing scene, the nearly blind Jacob looking not at the boys crouching at the foot of his bed, but off in the distance, his arms crossed over their heads. Joseph, off to the side, reaching toward his father's crossed hands, and the view out the window is of the pyramids, a reminder of Joseph's exalted position in Egypt. That other set of blessings in the Parsha also comes from Jacob on his deathbed, tailoring his remarks to each of his 12 grown sons. Swiss-born American painter Karen Foreman chooses to show not the sons, but the symbols that Jacob uses to describe each and their future roles in the Jewish community. After the death and burial of the patriarch, Joseph's brothers are fearful of the revenge he might take, and this turmoil in the family is the theme picked up by Christina Madison Ebert in the Vayechi Art in Her Drash Design series, including in the image the conciliatory words spoken to them by Joseph, "Fear not, am I instead of God? While you meant evil toward me, God meant it for good." Artist and sopheret Deborah Band uses a micrographic technique to include all the words of the Parsha interspersed with images from Mishnah and Kabbalah. The Montreal-born artist calls it Devart Torah, Torah inspired by art, and art inspired by Torah. She says what stands out for her in these final chapters of Bereshit is the role of justice, especially as represented in Jacob's blessings.
To me, it's striking that Jacob's evaluation and prophecy about his sons is offered here. Not just his simple love and ambitions for them, but clear-eyed evaluation of them as men, ranging from the ruthless to the euphoric. In this painting, I interpret the Parsha's subtle ideas of justice and judgment, and our ability to correct our course or not, following mistakes, tshuva. We see a scale representing Jacob's keen evaluation of his son's characters. The scale's balance offers the blessing, may you be like Ephraim and Manasseh, with which, of course, we parents now bless our sons. The swinging pans of the scale hold imagery of the son's deeds and Jacob's clear-eyed judgment of them. Sin at left, the Kabbalistic side of God's harder attributes, outweighed by goodness at right, the side of God's gentler attributes. Notably, the Lion of Judah, the tribe that will one day lead all Israel, looks back from the side of good. As Yehuda remembers his past abuse of his daughter-in-law Tamar, he's now changed his course so dramatically, done such tshuva, that dying Yaakov knows that this son's descendants will merit the leadership of all Israel in future.
That's Deborah Band describing her Devart Torah for Vayechi.
Beautiful.
Nice one. That was a goodie.
Really.
There's so many different directions that this parasha goes that it's really, really rich for interpretation. I think like many crossroads, we look at endings and beginnings as very rich times, and that feels like the art works in that way. This this month more than others.
Well, with Sarah about to embark on her voyage, I think we should say the Mishaberach, mention her prominently in the Mishaberach.
Absolutely.
Should we mention her phone and computer?
Oh, you're muted, Sarah. But we are mentioning on the screen Marilyn Anderson and Craig. You seem to be doing better, but
Oh, I'm much better. Don't waste a Mishaberach on me.
it's never wasted. It's like blessings. There's never, there's not a finite amount,
Okay,
right?
then I'll take it, but I feel fine.
Thank God.
I just, there's going to be a lot of Misha Berachs going out to the souls of young people who are, again, being asked to do things that they don't even have the maturity to ponder. So Misha
Crazy.
Berach to the souls of our young people.
Also, Misa Barak for Stuart, he wrote me he's still struggling with his health.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
And while we're on our community, I guess to Jan. Who else in our community? I guess
Mike Bernstone.
Mike and Alice and Sherry.
Roz Cohn.
My daughter, Joanna, please.
My brother, Shalom Benim again. And I'll take one too, since my procedure I had didn't work. So,
Oh, sorry.
yeah. I'm not going to kvetch online, but
If a little kvetching makes you feel better, it's fine. Wait till after. I guess I need it too. My thumb tendon is still not healed. It's been in a splint for a month already. And it's not round one either. So I like it to heal, please. Thank you.
Okay, sounds like we need a very powerful Misha Berach to channel that.
I want to say Barbara Lewis.
Amen.
We always forget Barbara. I don't know if you know her, but she was part of our community for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And did we say Trina? She's still healing from her surgery.
No, I don't know about Trina.
Okay. They're all in our sphere.
Yeah. And I guess Sandy
From
too.
Ready? Before I start out, the mainland contingency, my sister and our friend Gina. Mishe berach avotenu l'kor habracha v'tenu. So on his books, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen.
Amen.
Mishe berach Tenu v'kor habracha v'tenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal body, the renewal spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Baruch
Baruch
atah
atah
Adonai,
Adonai
Eloheinu
Eloheinu
Melech
melech
haolam,
haolam
asher
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 kidshanu
kitshanu
kidshanu
b'mitzvotav
b'mitzvotav
v'tzivanu
v'banu
so
l'shatot
b'divrei Torah.
who's fresh and has breath and
I will.
actually we're okay, so we're only gonna read 4 lines for a minute just to find
Okay,
some
that's good.
parallels and then
That's perfect. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. And Jacob's days, the years of his life, were 147 years. And Israel's time, wait, gotta get rid of this, hold on. And Israel's time to die drew near. And he called for his son, for Joseph, and he said to him, if pray, I have found favor in your eyes, put your hand, pray, under my thigh, and act toward me with steadfast kindness. Pray, do not bury me in Egypt. When I lie down with my fathers, carry me from Egypt and bury me in their burial place. And he said, I will do as you have spoken. And he said, swear to me. And he swore to him. And Israel bowed at the head of the bed.
there were just a couple of gleaming parallels in these first few lines that I didn't want to skip over because we are finishing a book and this one feels like it actually, in terms of a literary structure, it works. It works. There's an ending to some thing and a beginning of something new, and this one actually makes sense that the book ends right here to me. So the 2 parallels that of course I closed my book I just have to find the Hebrew. When I do that, I'm so sorry. I'm so organized until the moment comes.
You know, there is a rabbinic question of why the parsha starts on this line and not on the previous line as the last line from the last parsha.
Okay, what's the last line of the last parasha? I'll read it.
Israel thus settled in the land of Egypt in the region of Goshen. They struck roots in it, were fruitful, and multiplied greatly.
Okay. Works
Which,
both ways for me, but the parallels I'm looking for is the 17 years, because the last time we encountered 17, it was the 17 years that Yosef got to live in the house of Yaakov, right? Joseph grew up in the house, and now Joseph comes and he spends the 17 years before he dies. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then, yeah, That's the main one. I wanted to focus on that one. And then this, I can't turn the pages in my book for some reason. Okay, and then the other one was putting the hand under the thigh,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. What's that about? I
Well,
forgot. I forgot.
there
I
was
used to.
there was a story of Eliezer when he is being tasked to go find a wife for Isaac, I believe. Am I right about that context? I
Yes,
think that's where it was.
yes.
Okay, so I think it's really interesting that those are very specific, and they're so specific that I'm not sure that 17 has another significant story in the Torah, and that putting the hand under the thigh also, I don't remember that coming up anywhere else. So just wondering if that struck anyone else.
The
Ruthel?
17 seems to reference, it's more code matching, that Joseph lived for 17 years before he was sold as a slave.
Yeah.
He was in with his family.
Right.
When I heard the thigh, I was reminded of Yaakov wrestling with the messenger, the angel, and then being struck in the thigh.
Right.
But I don't know if there's any connection that way or not.
But the actual words where it says "Simna yadcha," please, if you will, put your hand under my thigh. Those were, I think, were the exact words. I'm going to look it up while we're talking. So I want to hear Ruth Ellen, but I'll try to. It's probably in the notes here, telling me exactly what line to look for. So go ahead, Ruth Ellen.
It's Genesis 24:2, Aviva.
Okay, I'll look it up while.
But under the thigh, I actually never looked it up. I just kind of assumed that was a tradition of the day when you swear to somebody and when you make a promise, you know, and to fulfill it, and that you're not going to back down, you know, like being blood brothers now, or, you know, I didn't think of it as particularly being something that started with Abraham's family. I might be wrong about that, but I think it's just why the thigh, I'm not sure, but that intimacy that said, you know, I really, really, really want you to promise to do this. So whether it happens other places, I don't know. But I guess it also shows how important it was ultimately that Egypt was a sojourn, and it was, you know, Jacob never saw of it as any final resting place for him. And of course, in the broader sense of things, as Israel, in his role as Israel, that wasn't the destiny of his descendants either. So it might be like kind of foreshadowing that.
I think you're right. I think this is a clear recognition by Jacob. This is not where we need to end up, and that you have to promise me that, you know, that the promise gets fulfilled, because we're not staying here. Just as my body goes back to the cave that was bought by our ancestors, so the people will go back there as well.
Arnie?
Okay, forgive me if I'm being profane here, okay? But, you know, a lot of cultures put their hand on their crotch when they are swearing to something. And maybe they didn't want to say crotch, so they said something as close as possible. You know, I don't know what the tradition was back then, but I know in ancient cultures that was a gesture I've seen.
Are you suggesting that the Jews once again created something X-rated that was never before, and here it is in the Torah?
No, I think it was a common thing back then. And, you know, when they're telling the story, they just didn't want to put crotch in there.
Yeah.
You know, so they said thigh, pretty close, you know.
The definition of what is offensive has evolved over the years, and I think it comes from a different culture altogether, and then we superimpose it onto Judaism. But in the commentary, based on the exact words, the words are exactly the same in the incident of Eliezer. I just looked it up, and it says in the commentary, the thigh represents the male organ. Apparently, one who touches his member who touches his member when swearing an oath is obliged to uphold that oath on pain of either sterility or death of offspring.
My
So
point
that actually makes,
exactly.
well, but so not personal pain. It's not a personal pain. It's not personal shame or personal pain. What is it? The pain that will affect the possibility of offspring or the offspring themselves. And that ties in very much like what Jacob is asking for is not something for himself. He's asking for that continuity, and we're going to see this very same theme with the blessing of the grandchildren in just a little bit. It's about the continuity.
Yes, this whole chapter is about the continuity.
I will add from the AI overview I got, I just started put was placing a hand and then under the thigh, and right away it says, often related to progeny, strength, and authority, binding the oath taker to fulfill promises concerning future generations, family legacy, or loyalty. Sometimes interpreted as a euphemism for the loins or genitals to invoke fertility and lineage. So I think you got it on the. You nailed that one, Arnie. It's not. Excuse me. I just did a euphemism.
It was intuitive.
I do that a lot, and I really don't. I don't think my subconscious works like that until after the fact.
You know, everything froze.
We can hear you.
Yeah.
I think that, I think of this as the inside of the thigh where the femoral artery is, which we know if it's severed, you will die. And that's as sensitive a place in your body as any other place, the inside of your thigh.
Isn't it under the thigh that's referenced here? I mean, it has to do with these oaths that have something to do with future generations. So you're in effect touching the source of where those future generations come from. It certainly makes it memorable, but have to say that in my over 40 years in the courts, I'm glad we did not administer oaths.
Well, thank you for that, Craig. So,
That's
okay,
much
I just
better.
want, go ahead, Alan.
That's much better than where I was going. I was thinking, how did we connect this with the way Michael Jackson popularized that as a dance move? But
He was a little Jewish.
I don't think making lasting oaths was on their mind at all when they picked up these.
But I think all the notes that I found say that it's euphemistically it's the solemnity of the oath, that it's not just of okay, I'll raise my hand and I promise you this. It's I really promise you this. It's a very serious an oath to be taken very seriously.
So there are two instances where this is used, and in the first one, it's when Abraham needs to worry. He has the one son that is severely damaged, and how is continuity going to happen? And in this case too, here when we think of the grace we afford someone on their deathbed is they get to say what they want. It's no longer a gathering for an argument or a symposium. It's their time, and for Jacob to actually say, "If you please," or "please," to plead with Joseph to take him to be buried, not to be buried in Egypt. It feels significant. It's his moment. He doesn't need to plead. That's what struck me here. Yehuda, you have your hand up, and we can hear you.
I was just thinking that, by creating a euphemism here, rather than saying specifically what Arnie was saying, that your penis, that by doing it this way, you do not just relegate this to man. A female also can have this, even though it's not done in the Torah. It's not gender specific.
Well,
Can I
do we
say-
have instances of women in the story making that oath?
No, that's why I
So
said
why
it's
do you
not
think
actually
that?
specific within, and yet by using these particular words, it does not make it gender specific.
Vervased.
Go ahead, Alan.
The theme of continuity that you and Yehuda brought up, I think, is an interesting one because in this case, he's saying it's his burial that will ensure that continuity. That the fact that he does not want to be, he insists, I don't want to be buried in Egypt. I want to be buried where my fathers were
Right.
buried,
right.
and that's an interesting. It's not necessarily a continuity of. He's not going to have any more kids once he's buried, but there is a continuity of and a connection with that location as well.
And I think, I realized this a while ago that anytime some story is introduced to us in the Torah, it's never coincidence and it never goes away. I mean, this to me gives sort of more weight to the idea that the Torah was retro written, was written after the history happened. Because the theme of continuity, if we start, okay, so Avraham, he buys. He doesn't get given. He doesn't beg for it. He pays full money. That's how important it is to him. He says, "No, I don't want it. It's not charity. This is important." And the continuity of the fathers, because that's all we have in the story, being buried there. It there's in Jewish tradition the idea of a burial place being a forever place that you'll go visit, right? Like I go to Israel now every March because that's the month both my parents died and the whole family goes up to the grave. And what Yaakov, Jacob is saying, which is similar to what we know about Moses and that no one knows where he's buried, is that God forbid his burial place will become a shrine and the Israelites will be reluctant to leave Egypt. It's way too early to be talking about that, granted. But it's that concept that it's the moving forward and the future orientation, the only one that offers hope. If you only stay with what you have, you're stuck with what you already know. But the idea of hopefulness and like all the possibilities, they always lie in a future orientation. And not in staying back because, well, I buried my father here, I shouldn't leave.
Right. Okay.
Sarah?
And it worked. And it worked. The cave is still there.
Yeah.
And, whatever, 3,000 years ago.
I will mention it causes a lot of political grief and aggravation, but that's a separate story. I want
Yeah.
to hear Sarah and then you, because I see Sarah's hand up.
This thing about the thigh, I think it also reveals or symbolizes strength. And this fight that Jacob had with the angel or whoever was sort of a fight between the spiritual world and the physical world. And his being buried also is between the physical world being buried in a certain place. But why do you want to be buried in a certain place? I'm just thinking of this because I just had a discussion with the Rebbitzin here in Mesa, who I adore. She's wonderful. Talking about, why is it important to have a Jewish burial in a Jewish place, but also what are the spiritual ramifications of this? And so I see the thigh as a place of strength, and also the separation, or not the separation of, but both the spiritual and physical part of that promise that Joseph wanted to be buried, have a Jewish burial. That's why it was so important on both, the physical level and material world, but also on the spiritual level. And And she was like concerned about him. Are you going to have a tahara? Stuff like that, because to them, it's also about where your soul goes, how it goes after you pass away. Yeah, so I think that's kind of interesting that we're reading this parsha, and I think that's exactly what Joseph had in mind. He doesn't want to be buried with the Egyptians, even though he lived in Egypt and his life was in Egypt and all of that. He could come back as an Egyptian, God forbid. Right.
Um, I just want to make sure that we call on you before Arnie, because you had your hand up earlier, and then Arnie.
I want to reiterate sort of what you said, but in slightly different words. I think the importance of having purchased the cave for a place of burial and actually being, in effect, participating in the business of living, when matched up against the idea of the promised land and what God has given the Jews is not the land. God has given the Jews the idea of the whole thing, and that this is an idea that can be manifest, and you manifest it in effect by doing it. You buy the land, you use the land, and you move forward in that way, manifesting the idea. The idea is the important thing here. It is not the actual physical gift.
Right. Yeah. That goes along with what I said.
Everybody's tying
it together. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's beautiful.
Arnie?
Yeah, I guess it was later law, maybe rabbinical law later on, where, it became the custom to put the body in the dirt the next day rather than, preserving it and all that. So, I mean, obviously they couldn't do that in this case. So, does anyone know, did that law start later, and was it the tradition to preserve corpses back in the day, or what?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to it, but you're right.
I don't know, but at the end of our parasha, the issue of doing the custom of the place and I can only think of the term in Hebrew for the Egyptian preservation of the body. The word's not coming to me in English.
Embalmment.
Embalmment. Thank you.
Embalmment.
There's a question too. Why didn't Moses want that? Moses wasn't buried in the cave, and Moses is an important figure.
Right, but I think Arnie's asking specifically about the tradition that the
Of
burial
burying
happens.
underground. Isn't he asking about being buried underground? Correct me
No,
if
thought
but
I'm
Arnie
wrong.
was
no,
asking about the time.
within
No,
a day.
Okay,
No,
I'm
no.
wrong.
Yeah.
What I said was usually you try to get the body in the ground within a day.
I see. Okay.
And here they're schlepping it all the way back,
Right.
which obviously took longer.
Right. Right.
I want to hear Matan, and then I'll
Maybe
have
it's
something to
more
add.
important that he be, again, more important that he be buried correctly with his own people than to be buried in a day. Because I know other Jews who were not buried in a day. Judy and Jerry were not buried in a day because they had to go through the whole process of getting a place for their burial, a blessed Jewish place, a cemetery for their burial. So, it took days for that. I don't even remember how long, but I know it wasn't right away. So I think I probably the rabbis have exceptions for that. I would guess.
I'll add more to that later, but I want to
Okay.
hear Matan.
Okay, let me see. Okay, yeah, am I unmuted?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I think this is kind of in contrast to the Egyptians who did mummification.
Yeah.
And he was just
Oh,
saying he didn't want to be mummified.
good point.
And like the Egyptians. But I think that I'm reading a book. I just finished a book by a lady named Caitlin Dougherty, who's not Jewish and doesn't really seem to know much about Judaism. And she writes about all the funerary customs. And decomposition starts incredibly fast once a body's dead. And the smell starts to begin, and the odor and all that stuff. So it behooves you, if you're not going to do some kind of mummification or some kind of preservation, to get a body buried pretty quickly.
Yehuda, and then Ruth Ellen. You're muted, Yehuda. I don't know why you're
That's
muted.
interesting.
Yehuda, you are muted.
I mean, I think that's interesting, that point. Like, how did they keep the body from absolutely smelling while they were? I mean, I think we're skipping over the point that he's making, but it's an
And-
interesting point. What did they do? It doesn't say anything about that, but what did they do to,
That's Egyptian
they embalmed
embalming.
it?
It does say it in the parsha. We're going to get there, but
Yes.
Oh, okay.
in chapter 50, line 2, and Joseph charged his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father, and
That's,
the physicians embalmed Israel.
Right.
that's what
So
happened.
yeah. And again, it's not the foreverness of it. It's that they lived in a place where they could partake of the knowledge. So even though the point was to bring him somewhere, the embalming had to happen in order for him to,
Right.
right? So it's all accounted for. I don't know who was first. I see you this hand.
Well,
I see
I
Ruth
couldn't
Ellen.
unmute before. My computer's being wonky today. I've already been kicked off this one time, but the actual reference to getting the body into the ground is from Deuteronomy 21:23. It says, "You must not let his corpse remain on the stake overnight. You must bury him the same day. For an unimpaled body is an affront to God. You shall not defile the land that the eternal your God is giving you to possess."
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. I see Ruth Ellen, and
Did,
then
did he mean unimpaled? What did you read there, Yehuda? You said unimpaled?
Forget
Did you
about
mean
the
embalmed?
impaled part. The important part is one day into the ground.
Okay, but did you say unimpaled?
Forget about that
embalmed? No,
no,
I'm
he
telling you,
said
forget about
impaled.
that part. You can read it yourself. It's Deuteronomy 21:23.
okay, thanks.
Okay, Ruth
I
Ellen.
thank Yehuda for pointing that out, because I didn't remember explicitly in the laws where there was any reference to how to be buried. So that's number one. And to Arnie's point, yet all of this came later. We tend to do this conflate, when Sarah says Jacob wanted a Jewish burial, there was no such thing at that time. All I can say is they didn't follow the Oriental tradition of by fire. I think what was taken as I can't think of the word, intrinsically understood is Adam met from the land. You were supposed to be buried. We have this discussion all the time now in modern day when Jews I'm going through it myself and my own mother about not being cremated because that's not the Jewish tradition. So a lot of the actual rules that Arnie, I think, is referring to, I think all came in the post temple period, and it was how to deal with these things. The key point, however, really is he wanted to be buried with his family, not in Egypt. And that becomes illustrated even more dramatically by the fact that the Egyptians had this whole embalming procedure and taken out this, especially the kings, that they thought they were gods and would come back, and all the pharaohs had their innards embalmed separately from their bodies and mummified and all that. So that's the one big distinction.
So Ruth Ellen,
But
do
I
you
don't
think?
think Jacob was really thinking about that, or whether it would be one day or not. You were the one who mentioned very nicely the idea of combining the physical interpretation with the spiritual meaning of everything, but they had to manage these practical
I want to ask you
improbabilities.
something.
Yeah.
I want to ask you if you think that this was one of the beginnings of Jewish burial, because he did ask to go back.
Oh, yeah, I believe. I mean, the earlier references, because the first one to die was Abraham, or the first was Sarah, and he planned that. So I think we deduced from what our original patriarchs and matriarchs did. I mean, you could think, why didn't they think of cremation, or dropping them into the Dead Sea, whatever, I mean, there are other ways, and other cultures have used other ways of disposing of a no longer used body.
So this was like the beginning of the custom.
I could see that being an argument, yeah.
I'm going to clarify some things and divide this into different categories after I hear Arnie and you, though, because we're starting to bring a lot more into it than I think we need to at this point. So Arnie, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to remind everyone that the burial practices changed over many centuries. And during the temple period, for instance, the use of ossuaries was the popular method, where they'd let the body rot in these limestone boxes, and then take the bones out,
Right.
and put them somewhere. So, it's not a straight line of practices. And I was thinking if they didn't want to do the full embalming back in Egypt, which would have taken the organs out and put them in a separate jar and whatever, they could have just put them in a sealed box with honey, because honey preserves everything. Vervace, I don't know. But, the point is, we probably will never know. And we should also acknowledge that the burial practices of Judaism have been changing for, millennia.
Yehuda, did you have something to say?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I think that one of the things we're seeing, it's the through theme. We're seeing over and over again that the Jews don't do things the way other people do them. And that keeps coming up over and over again. I mean, we deal with progenitor. I mean, we're going to see where does the blessing go? Does not go to the firstborn. The Jews don't do things the way other people do them. And part of the whole writing of the Torah is to actually demonstrate that in word.
Right. And thank you very much, because that's where I wanted to bring this before we move on, that the point is not the actual practices. The point is that to give a sense of reality to the stories, we place them in their time. So the point is the burial with the ancestors. The practice was borrowed from the time. Well, how are we going to practically do this? Well, we can borrow some of the knowledge of the Egyptians, right? So it's all about what the purpose is. The actual how you get to it is a practice of the time. So Sarah, and I was here in the case of Jerry and Judy, there were a number of issues to be resolved. One was that they had a son who was much more religious, and the attempt to make sure that meeting his religious standards became an appropriate thing. So there's a lot of discussion with him. Number one. Number two, we see today that Jewish practices are being questioned in light of what we know ecologically about the practice of burying, right? So even like there is legitimate Jewish discussion about other possibilities other than burial in the ground in places that are overcrowded. So the point is it's an ongoing thing. And what Arnie's bringing up, what we're all saying is, in this story, they were living at the time in a place that had practices, and they borrowed from them in order to continue the story, because our story doesn't end in Egypt. We are in Egypt in order to create a story that's plausible about the understanding of being strangers in a strange land, for example. So it's all to support the story, but the actual burial practices, they evolved. And what they look like today came from a lot of historical places, combined into something that looks at the reality. So the reality is Israel is a very small country. Most Jews live outside of Israel. When a person in Israel dies and their family's overseas, can you hold off burying the body the next day in order to honor the family? And that's a rabbinic reason to say, oh, we're not going to bury until, the majority of the family or the important members of the family can get here. So the rabbinic discussion on this continues. it's not like a once and done, and but in the time that now we find ourselves, the reality is that a lot of Jewish burials, because Jews don't live in family clans together, that the honoring the family is an important enough value that we might change some of our practices in order to incorporate that. And that comes exactly from this tradition, the honoring. It's about the honoring. Why? The lima'an, the why of it all, for the continuity. And that's what I'm reading into this. Go ahead, Yehuda.
Our story is here right now in Torah study. This is the continuity to this day, to this time, in this place, today, right now. In addition, your point is that if there's a set of priorities about what's most important here, it's not getting the body into the ground in one day. It's getting the body into a place where there are other Jews. Now, my mother died in New York. She was not buried the next day. She was flown in a plane to Israel, and the family gathered in Israel to bury her a couple days later.
Yep. Sarah?
I will just say quickly, that's an ideal, but I mean, even in the Jewish, because my grandfather died on a Friday, you can't have a burial on Shabbat. So there's always exceptions to every rule. And we get into all the questions that you're going to get into on Monday. That's because it's the motivations behind these rules that should ultimately take precedence, which is what allows for the discussion and possible adaptation given the current circumstance.
Yeah. All right, I think, Sarah, I lowered your hand before I had a chance to speak, so go ahead. Oh, you're muted, though.
Oh, it's always something. Okay, so I just going along with what you guys are all saying. I just listened to Bibi's speech, his latest speech, and in it, which is just like a day old or something, like maybe even yesterday. And one thing that he did say was talking about somebody's son who died, who is still not back in Israel, and we're going to bring him home. We're going to bury him home. And it's still like it's a big enough deal that he's talking about it in his speeches, which really it had nothing to do with the gist of his speech, but that was so important. So anyway, I just threw that in there.
All right, Arnie.
I just thinking of all these other rituals that came later, like renting your clothes, which became the little black ribbon you tear when you're and sitting Shiva and stuff like that, came later. All these traditions came from somewhere. I don't know where they came from, but and I'm not sure it's the same in Sephardic as Ashkenazi either. So, I mean, it's just it's a living religion, and things just constantly change, and we just gotta understand that that's how it works. That's the human condition.
Sitting Shiva came from this parsha.
Really?
Yes,
Yeah.
You'll see it later. Yeah.
They mourned him
cool.
for 7 days. Actually, so we're going to do a chunk now. We're going to go all of 48. No, 1 through 22, or so. Yeah, 1 through 48, 1 through 22. So that's all of 48. And somebody with a good, I don't know, I'm kind of thinking that it should be Heather, because you're not going to be here later. So we get to hear your lovely voice if you're up to it. I can't see
I'm
my.
working on it. I'm
Oh.
sorry. I had to get
Okay.
unmuted.
Okay.
I'm not sure I have a lovely voice, but thanks anyway. And it happened after these things that someone said to Joseph, "Look, your father is ill." And he took his 2 sons with him, Manasseh and Ephraim. And someone told Jacob and said, "Look, your son Joseph is coming to you." And Israel summoned his strength and sat up in bed. And Jacob said to Joseph, "El Shaddai appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me." and said to me, I am about to make you fruitful and multiply you and make you an assembly of peoples. And I will give this land to your seed after you as an everlasting holding. And so now your 2 sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt shall be mine. Ephraim and Manasseh, like Reuben and Simeon, shall be mine. And those who begot after them shall be yours. By their brothers' names they shall be called in their inheritance. As for me, when I was coming from Padan, Rachel died to my grief in the land of Canaan on the way, still some distance from Ephrath, and I buried her there on the way. Ephrath is Bethlehem. And Israel saw Joseph's sons, and he said, Who are these? And Joseph said to his father, These are my sons who've God had given me here. And he said, Fetch them, pray to me that I may bless them. And Israel's eyes had grown heavy with age, he could not see. And he brought them near him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, I had not thought to see your face, and look, God has also let me see your seed. And Joseph drew them out from their knees, and he bowed his face to the ground. And Joseph took the 2 of them, Ephraim with his right hand to Israel's left, and Manasseh with his left hand to Israel's right, and brought them near him. And Israel stretched out his right hand and placed it on Ephraim's head, yet he was younger. And his left hand was on Manasseh's head. He crossed his hands, though Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed them, and he said, The God who's in whose presence my father walked, Abraham and Isaac, the God who had looked after me all my life till this day, the messenger rescued me from all this evil. May he bless the lads. Let my name be called in them, and my name and the name of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac. Let them teem multitudinous in their midst of the earth. And Joseph saw that his father had placed his right hand on Ephraim's head, and it was a wrong in his eyes. And he took hold of his father's hand and removed it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, No, not so, my father, for this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head. And his father refused. And he said, I know, my son, I know. He too shall become a people, and he too shall be great. But his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall be a fullness of nations. And he blessed them that day, saying, By you shall Israel bless, saying, May God set you as Ephraim and Manasseh. And he set Ephraim before Manasseh. And Israel said to Joseph, Look, I am about to die, but God shall be with you and bring you back to the land of your fathers. As for me, I have given you with single intent over your brothers what I took from his hand of the Amorite with my sword and my bow. Okay.
Thank you. Boy, this is loaded.
I'll ask right off the bat because I forgot. Is Amorite that's he's not talking about Esau, is he? No, Esau is Edomite.
They're
Esau
the-
is the Edomites,
Yeah.
but so I don't know what the Amorites. So I'll have to look at the. Just it's the last thing she read.
I'm going to grab a little more time than necessary, than is appropriate, but I read something that was so powerful that I want to read it to you guys. So there's this commentator, Pinchas Peli. He's actually an Israeli rabbi, I believe. And
we used to read him every Shabbat. I remember that.
Yeah, and this is we had this. We've always had this book, and there is something here that I want to read that I just struck me too powerfully. Jacob knew that he was responsible for the fate of his grandchildren. This is in reference to the line 48:8, where the sons Menashe and Ephraim are presented to him, and he says, "Who are these?" Like, why is he saying that? They clearly don't look the way he expects them to look. Maybe they don't look like their father. Maybe they look too Egyptian in his eyes. So in that light, I'm reading this. Jacob knew that he was responsible for the fate of his grandchildren. If he did not transmit to them the blessings of his tradition, someone else at a much later date might remind them of it in the most horrible ways. Thus writes philosopher Emil Fackenheim in his epoch-making work on the Holocaust. This is a quote from Fackenheim. The 1 million Jewish children murdered in the Nazi Holocaust died neither because of their faith nor in spite of their faith. They were murdered because of the faith of their great-grandparents. Had these great-grandparents abandoned their Jewish faith and failed to bring up Jewish children, then their fourth-generation descendants might have been among the Nazi executioners, not among their Jewish victims. Wow.
Can you read that again, please?
Oh, sure. Just that quote. The 1 million Jewish children murdered in the Nazi Holocaust died neither because of their faith nor in spite of their faith. They were murdered because of the faith of their great-grandparents. Had these great-grandparents abandoned their Jewish faith and failed to bring up Jewish children, then their fourth-generation descendants might have been among the Nazi executioners, not among their Jewish victims. I got chills when I read this. I was like, oh, that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, because we're talking about continuity. And, you know, I want to hear Matan, but later we'll talk about some of the parallels and the images and the blessings, so to speak, in this part we just read. So go ahead, Matan.
I don't know if I believe that, because wouldn't they still have a Jewish soul? I mean, I don't know.
Oh, it's a good discussion. I want to hear Matan, and then we can get back into this. It's powerful. I've been thinking about it all morning since I read it.
Oh, that's really something.
Go ahead, Matan. I took your hand down already.
One thing I noticed is that he used the word might, which means he realizes that his statement is speculative.
Yeah.
So that may or may not have saved them. But I think I see this as a more from the Nazi point of view, more of a pragmatic thing. They couldn't get any meaningful labor out of the children. But you know, and there could have been 1,000 reasons why they could have been sent to the camps beyond the grandparents. Not the conversion to the Nazis didn't make a lot of difference, really.
No.
Because the problem was the DNA. And
Right,
that you can't change with the baptism.
But the way he ended it, that without the continuity and the passing on the fill in the blank, the whatever you want to call it, that those young people could have easily ended up being the executioners. That was very chilling for me, because I'm reading Torah in my day. And by the way, I'm not looking for any absolute truth. This one hits me very hard this year. This particular reading. And you know, I've read this before. I've owned this book for a long time. And this year, it just chilled me.
What book is it? I'm sorry. I was distracted.
It's just called Torah Today by Pinchas Peli.
We bought it when we were living in Kentucky because we wanted to do something that had to do with reading Torah. And we read one chapter every week. It was a long time ago. You know, it sort of suggests that this is an abhorrent thing to say, but he's sort of suggesting that it's better to be an executed person than an executioner.
Good discussion. I don't want to really go into the depth of that statement, because what I want to do is keep it in the light of what we're reading today, which is about continuity. Mm-hmm. So that's why I read it, because he addresses that issue, that without the continuity, because when Yaakov looks at his grandsons and he says, who are they? He might be looking and saying, I don't recognize the way they look. I don't recognize the way they dress. I don't recognize their values. So who are they?
Right. Who are they can mean exactly that. Exactly. Who means something different than that. It's like, who are they inside?
Yeah. Arnie? Oh, you're muted, Arnie.
Although there were Jews who worked with the Nazis and turned other Jews in, that's true too.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if this is true, but I had read historical references that said Hitler had some Jewish blood, a great-grandparent or something like that. Like I said, I don't know if it's true, but if it was, it's kind of prophetic. You know, when you think about this, what it says, you know.
I don't know.
It could be disastrous
I think that's
think that I rather would look at the idea that morality does not pass through blood, it passes through teaching. And I think that that's the transition that at the deathbed, when people get the platform, right? Like nobody's going to interrupt them. They're saying very important things that they're, if you've ever been with a elderly person dying, there's a reverence for hearing what they say, because they're clear, like they have no agenda anymore. They, whatever, they're kind of pure. They're purifying in order to be able to move to the next phase. And I have to read this in that light, because like I said, it's not often that a chapter in Torah ends at a place where we're like, okay, that was a good ending. Ha, now we get a breather because the next chapter is starting. This feels like a very appropriate literary technique to put things in a place where we're like, okay, there's a lot to absorb. We get a week break and then we start again. And more than other times of transitions in chapters, this one feels, it feels historically correct and continues to be.
Can I just say that Hitler, the idea that he had any Jewish ancestors is completely debunked. This is a rumor. It's not true. His ancestors, none of them were Jewish, and DNA supports that evidence. I don't know how, maybe from relatives of his that are still alive. I don't know, but that has pretty much been debunked. Thank God, because otherwise we're all screwed.
It seems like someone had a hand up and I don't see it anymore. With Ellen, go ahead.
I'll put it up now and change the subject, because maybe I want Viva to go and look back. Because there was a term when, I should look at it, when they used the term for all his peoples. Here's this thing again, that we are one nation. And Hashem, when the covenant says to Abraham, a great nation, stars in the skies. And yes, here they pluralize it. And then we are going to get to the fact that there are still distinctions made between the blessings, the propensities or proclivities, of each individual tribe. I see this as a continual major paradox of living, that constant balancing of the scales, apropos with the arts, between promoting the benefit of the whole, which is ultimately expressed in Lador Vador, that we're doing this for the future generations because we're not going to be here forever. And yet we cannot have future generations. Even talking about the Holocaust, my husband used to talk, it's an irony. Being a martyr, even the Jews that in some ways, does the end justify the means? Even the capos or whatever were going on their instinctual desire to survive, and those who became martyrs are not often the ones who held the seeds into the next generation, so nothing can be decided unequivocally about any of this. But I just wonder what anybody thinks about the fact, and is it technically plural in the Hebrew? Because what would be for nation would be peoples. What would it look like in the plural?
Is singular and plural.
Okay.
When you pluralize to amim, it says it means nations. So it means other nations.
Oh, nation.
Whereas
so when it's translated as peoples, then maybe I'm misinterpreting. They really didn't just mean as one nation. But it doesn't actually change the fact that in reality, pragmatic physical terms, there are these distinctions made. And right here, we're having the distinction over who gets what blessing. And they've discussed over and over again, even one Drash I just glanced on, the whole idea of in every generation, the parental favoritism being a driver of a lot of the action. If Jacob hadn't explicitly showed so much favoritism to his youngest son, maybe he wouldn't have been endured the jealousy and the impact of that jealousy by his older brother. So, you know, it's all there. And I guess maybe as I'm saying this out loud, this all has to do with the individual deciding what choice to make. You know, you can walk humbly with your God and all these other ways that we talk about it later, following the blessings, not the curses, not turning left or right, you know, doing the right thing, which was all codified later. But that all came from the decisions that each of these individuals made on their journey through life. And if they had chosen a different way, we would have had a different outcome. So I don't have a conclusion. It's just
the Jewish concept that what you do individually affects others, so is inextricable. When we are instructed to follow in God's commandments, we are instructed individually, but the things that will befall happen to a community. So it is a very interesting, to me, this is like, I feel like I've been pursuing this truth. I'm doing a very un-Jewish thing. I have something I believe in. I'm looking for the justification for it in reading Torah, which makes me not very open-minded, but I don't ever unsee that the transfer of the idea of a covenant with a people, and this starts from a complete gross misreading of the story of in the Garden of Eden, which is a non-Jewish interpretation using words and images that are very non-Jewish to go way back to that origin story that we then carry forward. But it is not the God's search for man in order to have a covenant makes it inextricable from the idea that though you are one person, you are part of something. So that comes with a lot of good stuff, but it also comes with a responsibility that's unshakable. And that, I think, is this like the guiding light. And I can't, no matter how I try to interpret things differently by reading different things, I can't unsee that. I don't see any other reason for the detail in telling this story. And every day that we live in modern times makes this much more real for me. Like I can't ever unsee it. I don't even know what the value would be of thousands of years of sitting and studying if that's not kind of the point of it. So that's my personal weakness. But it's also like, it's a weakness that gives me strength every week, right? Because I'm finding it.
See, to your point of Eva, I feel very similar. I have a kindredship with you on that. And I think one of the reasons that helped me come back to all this, as I've discussed before, and Sarah will recognize, is finding these answers by looking at other traditions. In my case, it was the Eastern tradition. And then coming back and realizing this, I always go back to the big bugaboo is that this is translation, that words are not experienced themselves, and we're distilling it through all this history and individual perceptions and all that. And then when we bring that into the modern world, the idea of quantum physics, the idea of multi-universes, the idea of many things happening at the same time, when we look closely and we talk about Lador Vador, and when we remember what did that mean? I heard that as a kid every Pesach. It's as if you personally came out of Egypt. Now I read this again and I say, why do we have these recurring stories? Maybe, in fact, the way the Hindus would look at it, it is reincarnation. Cain and Abel, Jacob and Esau, Joseph and his brother. It's all the same story. It's happening to everybody all the time, all at once. But then when we distill it down to be in a physical lifetime and make some understanding of our physical world and our place in it in continuous time, which is, in living in the Newtonian physical world instead of the Einsteinian physical world, which they didn't even know about then. We have to partition all this stuff and look at it step by step. But when you try to make sense of the whole thing, you literally have to step back and look at the whole thing. I mean, that's the only way I can say it. So, which also brings me to the point that all of humanity is looking for the same thing, and we're more similar than we are different. And if that is what I think the best spiritual and religious teachings should be recognized and honored for, not for saying my way or the highway, which is so much of how we're living life on this earth right now.
I just want to say that the subject that we're dealing with flows right into this next section, for which I have zero to say. I have read these supposed blessings, which I don't see why they're called blessings, many times. I don't find anything compelling, except it seems to suggest to me that the theory that this was backwritten makes that theory more strong for me. Because I'm just going to read the first line. We're going to move on. I'm going to read the first line just before we start, so that then somebody can explain to me why are these called blessings. The next thing that happens is Jacob then summons his sons, saying, he called his sons and said, "Gather around, that I might tell you what shall befall you in the days to come. Assemble and hearken, O Jacob's sons, and hearken to Israel your father." Okay, so does he say, gather around, I've got blessings to give? No. Do these seem like blessings? Not to me in a plain reading. So I was wondering where the tradition of calling this like whole thing blessings, because with
They seem
the
more like
grandsons,
prophecies, excuse me. They seem
right,
more like prophecies.
right. With grandsons, there's clearly the use of the word blessing. He blessed them, saying, he blessed them, saying, right? And here, there's nothing in the wording that says blessing. Later, it's referred to. But whoever feels creative, because this is poetry, let's see, what did I mark that we would read? Let's see, we're at 49. I was going to do the whole thing 1 through 33, unless somebody doesn't want to do that. So
I would like to read that. The theatrical part of me would like to read that.
Great.
If no one else has a strong desire. Should I go for it?
Yes.
Assemble and hearken, O Jacob's sons, and hearken to Israel your father. Excuse me. Oh, sorry. Comment got in my way. Reuben, my firstborn are you, my strength and first yield of my manhood, prevailing in rank and prevailing in might. Unsteady as water, you'll no more prevail, for you mounted the place where your father lay. You profaned my couch, you mounted. Excuse me 1 second. Simeon and Levi, the brothers, weapons of outrage, their trade. In their council, let me never set foot. Their assembly, my presence shun. For in their fury, they slaughtered men. At their pleasure, they tore down ramparts. Cursed be their fury so fierce and their wrath so remorseless. I will divide them in Jacob, disperse them in Israel. Judah, you shall your brothers acclaim. Your hand on your enemy's nape, your father's son shall bow to you. A lion's whelp is Judah for the prey. O my son, you mount. He crouched, he lay down like a lion, like the king of beasts, and who dare arouse him? The scepter shall not pass from Judah, nor the mace from between his legs, that tribute to him may come, and to him the submission of peoples. He binds to the vine his ass, to the grape bough his ass is full. He washes in wine his garments, in the blood of the grape his cloak. O eyes that are darker than wine, and teeth that are whiter than milk. Zebulun, near the shore of the sea shall dwell, and he by the haven of ships, his flank upon Sidon. Issachar, a big-boned donkey, crouched amidst earths. He saw that the homestead was goodly, that the land was delightful, and he put his shoulder to the load, became a toiling serf. Dan, his folk will judge as one of Israel's tribes. Let Dan be a snake on the road, an asp on the path that bites the horse's heels, and its rider topples backward. Your deliverance I await, O Lord. Gad shall be goaded by raiders, yet he shall goad their heel. Asher's bread shall be rich, and he shall bring forth kingly dishes. Naphtali, a hind let loose, who brings forth lovely fawns. A fruitful son is Joseph, a fruitful son by a spring. Its branches run over a wall. They savaged him, shot arrows, and harassed him, the archers did. But taut was his bow, his arms ever moving through the hands of the champion of Jacob, through the name of the shepherd and Israel's rock. From the God of your fathers may he aid you. Shaddai, may he bless you. Blessings of the heavens above, blessings of the deep that lies below, blessings of breasts and womb. Your father's blessings surpass the blessings of timeless heights, the bounty of hills everlasting. May they rest on the head of Joseph, on the brow of the one set apart from his brothers. Benjamin, ravening a wolf, in the morn he consumes the spoils, at evening shares out plunder. These are the tribes of Israel, 12 in all, and this is what their father spoke to them, blessing them, each according to his blessing he blessed them. And he charged them and said to them, I am about to be gathered to my kinfolk. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephon the Hittites, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which faces Mamre, in the land of Canaan, in the field that Abraham bought from Ephron the Hittite as a burial holding. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife. And there I buried Leah, the field and the cave within it, bought from the Hittites. And Jacob finished charging his sons, and he gathered his feet up into the bed, and he breathed his last and was gathered to his kinfolk. Feels like we should say the Kaddish right now. Okay, there are, see, I didn't remember all that. Then they call them blessings at the end. Is that a translation of the Hebrew?
Yeah, so
And
what,
again, so what other connotations could that word mean?
okay, so he says, all these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and thus did their father speak to them as he blessed them, blessing each one with a blessing that befit him. So it feels retroactive. It feels more like he is being a keen observer, right? A keen observer. So for example, when Reuven, unsteady as water, what do we know about water? Can water
It will
hold its own?
fluctuate.
Water hold its own shape?
No,
Nope.
unless it's frozen.
Water takes on the shape of wherever it ends up. Right? So what is he saying about Reuven by saying that? He's to me, he's pointing at his weakness. He's not blessing them so much as pointing out their characteristics. And some of these were historically based, like Shimon and Levi, because of what they did after the rape of Dinah. But some are future oriented. Like
he's doing like an employer evaluation.
Yeah, more than that though. But I don't know. That to me, I don't see those as blessings. He's not like originally. He's not saying you shall, whatever. But maybe the blessing is in the fact that they are all very different, and that only together will they make a nation. I don't know.
I'll let Alan go first, and I'd like to say something.
Okay.
Well, it struck me, maybe that's because this is the sort of thing that we're hearing in our world today. There was a certain amount of retribution, certainly at the beginning, where he is scolding Reuben for, I guess the business with sleeping with one of his wives, and for that reason he's going to be cursed, or at least not get the best of blessings. And it's not necessarily what he did that was wrong. It's what he did to me that Yaakov seems to be saying.
Okay, so I thought that too, and then I looked at it differently. I'm sure impressed by something I read. That what he's really saying is you needed to take my concubine meant to displace me. Why don't you do it with some deeds of your own? That's a cheap way. That's you're like supplanting me, but you haven't done it on your own merit. I don't know. And then he follows it with like unsteady as water. I think there's a lot of really keen observation, and I don't like to think of people on their deathbed being that profound in that way. There's a grace that comes that kind of erases the sharp edges, and people are able to let go and move into the next phase by actually seeing the good. So even families who have not gotten along, whatever, if there's an opportunity to be at a deathbed, usually it feels like those things just, if you are harboring such ill thoughts about your family, you don't die. You keep going. It's that mystery of why somebody's body can be like gone and their kidneys have shut down and all this is happening and it's still there. It's like there's something that they haven't gotten to that greater, I don't want to use the term forgiveness, but like
To let go of
yeah,
something.
let go and see the beauty instead of holding on to the bad.
Mhm.
Okay, Arnie, and then Ruth Ellen, and then Yehuda, I think. Okay, Arnie.
I saw it as written like irony, kind of like I would flash back to Fiddler on the Roof and Tevye saying, "May God bless and keep the Tsar far away from us." Is it a blessing? They call it a blessing, but it really wasn't a blessing. In other words, it's irony.
Yes, there's irony. Go ahead, Ruth Ellen.
Well, I'm glad you brought up this question because it again made me realize that we take these connotations with us this whole time. And I don't know if, again, like we're talking about burial, the idea of blessing or like knighting or or crowning a king, whatever it would be, is something that was happening in the ancient world because Abraham had the covenant with Hashem and it was the circumcision. The next thing we hear about the blessing is Isaac and Jacob. I mean, Jacob and Esau with Isaac. And we don't get any backstory about what the idea of these blessings were. So now I'm trying to wonder if it's just a legacy or it's like giving their last will and testament. It's not a blessing per se, like we now think of it as being something that we're aspiring, we hope you to be. It is more like a last testament to what me as your father who was responsible for your birth thinks that you've made up of your life thus far, and maybe this should be in some cases, a warning. It's a guide, it's a warning, not so much the way we connote blessing now. And now you just made me realize that's probably not what the word was meaning at that time. We've imbued that later and then carried it back as if it always had that connotation. So I do, the way we can call it as a blessing is if we don't use that specific of a connotation of a blessing. That's all.
Yehuda, you had your hand up?
Yes, I think that we're not taking on what's really happening here. The clue is into which version of the name is being used. Is it Jacob or is it Israel? And each time it switches from one to the other, it switches how we're supposed to look at the text. And if you look back, on 21, it says, Israel then said to Joseph, I am dying now, but God will be with you, etc., etc. And then the very next line is Jacob summoned his sons. And then the line after that, assemble and hearken, O sons of Jacob. So every time it's Israel, I've always interpreted it, that's the promise. That's what God gave. Jacob is the old, foibled man. So then the next part is then in the blessing with Simon and Levi. It says, I will disperse them in Jacob and then scatter them in Israel. These are two very different things. And we have to actually pay attention to which one is it? Is it the old, flawed Jacob, or is it Israel the promise? And that is the key to looking at all of this. And we have to literally go back and re-look at it and stop at each one and say, what does this refer to? Which side is it referring to? The promise or the old scattered and flawed man?
Yeah, interesting. So I'm seeing that in line 7. Who's that referring to? In line 7, he's still referring to.
He's referring to Simon and Levi
right.
there.
Yeah.
And yet he says, I'll disperse them in Jacob. In other words, everything that they did has to do with the flaws of Jacob. But then the solution is spreading them through the promise, because the promise overrides all the things that, and I think we have to keep going through this whole thing in each one and saying, where does it actually reference the name? The next time it references the name is in Don. Now, Don is one of the ones who got a positive blessing. And he says, well, he will plead his people's cause. That's a very positive thing in Israel's cause. And then it goes, where does it go next? Joseph is sort of interesting, because with Joseph, it says, well, they harassed him, shot arrows at him, and the archers were foes to him, yet steady stayed his bow. Quick his arms, through the mighty one of Jacob, through the shepherd, Israel's rock. Every time there's this combination of Jacob leading to Israel is a pretty important way of looking at it. You know, where we're dealing with all the problems that Jacob has, but we're resolving them by the promise. I mean, it's a very sophisticated way of looking at the whole thing. And I'm not saying I am the wise person that can tell you what it means, but it is, it's a different way. What can I say?
I just want to add, I totally agree. And what we said before, in a way, I was going to say earlier that Jacob's almost like being an amanuensis. The fact that this is all in this poetic form, and it's all obviously metaphorical. And even when he talks about himself in the third person as Jacob, it's almost like at this state, he's on his deathbed. We could even say pragmatically at this point, he may be already be going in and out from consciousness, you know? So, yeah, I mean, it is metaphorical, and we have to take it with a grain of salt. And then yet in hindsight, thinking when this was written down by whoever, we know how some of it played out and the roles of these different tribes. We don't explicitly then say, ultimately, 10 of them get lost, which is the big thing, right? You know, they don't even carry on the promise. They hint here, which we can understand more now in retrospect, that the full line was going to come through Judah, you know, for whatever reason, some of which will become clearer later on as well. So I agree with Woody that mostly he's presenting this out loud more as Yisrael, as the mouthpiece to Hashem in a way, as opposed to his last rites. I mean, his last will and testament as a father, but yet the two are conflated in that. So,
by the way, remind yourself that in line 33, Jacob was done charging his sons and drew his last breath. So it ends with the flawed man who still has used his wisdom to see, this is what I see in my sons. And he's not even saying you can agree with me or not agree with me, because it's my blessing, not yours.
So I'm going to tie this to what Matan put in the chat, which is the missing thing that we've had 3 parashot to talk about this, and we haven't yet. So he says, Joseph wasn't a tribe, so maybe Joseph's fortune applies to Ephraim and Menashe. And then you added, looks as if a member of the tribe of Judah wrote this part. Okay, I'm not going to address that because I haven't had time to think about it. But as to your comment, Matan, about Joseph and Menashe and Ephraim. So the names are not coincidental in the Torah. Menashe comes from the root word of to leave something behind as a burden or something undesirable. And
or
Ephraim,
as Egypt.
Yeah, hold on. I'm talking generalities. And Ephraim comes from the root word, which we are familiar with in Hebrew, peru urbu, from the word fruit, fruitful, right? We see that multiple times. Be fruitful and multiply. So where does that? Why are the 2 progeny that we know of Joseph? One is named for the past, and one is future oriented. And later on in the stuff that we don't read together, but in terms of the northern kingdom and Ephraim, this idea of the progeny that actually populated the land. This is a very important concept. Ephraim is the future. It's the promised future, that the land will always be in with the people, and it will be greatly multiplied. The people will be greatly multiplied in the land. So that is a very important thing. And when he blesses his grandsons, when Jacob blesses his grandsons, he's saying, "You will be like sons to me."
He also is saying, look, you say, where's Joseph? Actually, Joseph has a double portion. His double portion, he's got two, not just one per son. He's got two of them representing moving forward. And it's interesting that it embraces both the past and the future.
So it's a little confusing to me because we always say the 12 tribes of Israel and, Israel being the name. And I always thought it was his 12 kids, but it's really two are his grandkids, right? So I mean,
But then
I
also
never
when we
heard
say
that.
that, they don't include the Levites.
Yeah, and the Levites are not one of them.
Are now, so that's how they end up with 12 again.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which is weird in itself, but to me,
but
well.
isn't Aaron a Levite? I mean, and Moses, they're Levites, right? They play a pretty big role later
Yes,
on.
Aaron is a Levite.
Yeah. And
See,
the
that's where
Levites
they sort of
become,
changed the meaning.
let me finish. The Levites become the Kohanim, which even puts them in a bigger place.
Until there's no temple.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, it's strange.
Just like we're talking about the burial, practically over time, the tradition is changing. It's almost, by the time we're talking about the tribes in that way and that the Levites don't have it after we've grown to this 400,000 people, is now they're representing physical, their physical ownership, quote unquote, of certain areas of land. And that's why the Levites were left out of that, because their portion was Hashem. They didn't have any land. So we're getting one step further away from it just being the genealogical description of literally the children that Jacob bore.
Thanks,
Right?
Ruth Ellen. That makes total sense to me. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So how complete is this? Because we know that somewhere along the line there was a daughter. Does she not get a blessing? Or are these blessings? Like, what's the legacy of Dinah? Because really it's the legacy, I think, more than
She was
the blessing.
left in the kitchen, blowing the horn.
In the kitchen, barefoot and pregnant.
So I have the women's commentary. That's the same translation as the Cloud commentary. But the commentary here is specifically only the missing parts, right? It's a women's commentary. So there's a poem here that I thought was kind of fun. Jacob blesses Dinah. Okay. I have wrestled with the words with which to bless you, Dinah, daughter of Leah. A child, you went out to see the daughters of the land. You returned a woman. Did you raise your voice? Your cries were not heard. Blood flowed through the streets of Shechem, and I was afraid. Like your mother, you walk among the people with head unbowed. May that strength and clarity of vision continue in the generations to come. To you, my daughter, belong the blessings of the breast and the womb, blessings of justice and care. Your offspring will learn many tongues and practice healing arts. They will build cities of righteousness, and none shall make them afraid. The concept of living safely in the land, which is really the great promise. I mean, the work is for people to make that happen, but the great promise is to live safely in the land, and none shall be afraid. So I thought that was, yeah. I mean, if you were writing a blessing for Dinah, what is in her legacy that carries forward, that becomes part of the fabric of the people. Because there's something there, it's just not written by the patriarchy that wrote the original, that wrote the stories. I'm looking for that line on the womb, which was one of the, oh, here it is. So in the blessing for Joseph, for Yosef, lots of lines, starts at 22, but where it ends in 25, this is still talking about Joseph. By the God of your father who helps you, Shaddai, El Shaddai, who blesses you, blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies below, blessings of breasts and womb. Yep, right there. Thanks, Alan. I mean, there's clearly something wrong. The blessings of breast and womb would unambiguously belong in the realm of women. So the only way to fit it in is to put it under the category of Joseph. I don't know. It is a little confusing because that's a very clear, even in the Hebrew, there's no escaping the feminine aspect of that part of the blessing.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels a little short-sighted that the authors could not be more creative to expand that. Craig, go ahead.
Yes, some of these blessings seem a little harsh and not that nice from Jacob or Israel to his sons. And for those of us with children named Benjamin, it's particularly interesting. I'm not sure if he's complimenting Benjamin or not. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning, he devours the prey, and in the evening, he divides the plunder. Is he being nice toward Benjamin? Is that a compliment or an insult? I'm not sure. But I do know this, and I guess there's no correlation, but even as we speak, we have this amazing full moon going on right now, and it's the wolf moon for whatever reason. It's named the wolf moon, not after this parsha, apparently, but I don't know if it's nice to describe somebody as a ravenous wolf or not.
Huh.
Ruth Ellen and then Alan.
I just had an epiphany about the notion of blessings because what Yaakov has said to his sons, he didn't beat around the bush. He didn't say, oh, my dearest son, you can do no wrong. He's giving them a wake-up call before he goes, look in the mirror. Look how you've lived your lives. This is what's going to happen. The blessing is you still have a chance, if you listen to me, to repent, get redemption, and move on. I mean, to a degree, what happened with Yehuda is the example of how, through his own humility and letting his ego drift away and realize what a fool he had been, he elevated himself and he matured. So the blessing really is that he's not letting them wallow in their illusion of who they are and is saying, this is what's really important, and snap out of it and you'll have a chance. And I kind of like that resolution.
Alan?
I find myself wondering whether because there's so much projecting into the future, whether we should see these as sort of like a horoscope that not only the individuals are being blessed, but their tribes now will have these attributes. Some for good, some not necessarily for good. And is it sort of a shadow that hangs over people who might have been part of that tribe and don't have these negative issues that are brought up in some of them?
Arnie, yeah, so this is a big subject, Alan. We're gonna have to come back to this because it's way too big. Okay.
I was just
Jonah,
remembering the Sodom and Gomorrah story, and the Benjamites weren't, you know, very much admired in that story. You know, to be a Benjamite was like a sodomite, you know, and so they definitely had a different reputation at that point than what's described here.
At what point?
In the story of, you know, when the angel comes knocking on the door.
But that was before. That was before, Arnie. There was no Benjamin then.
I thought they were called Benjamites for some reason. No?
It isn't. It may be phonically, it sounds the same, but it's not referring to the same
Okay.
people.
Yeah, that makes sense. I see your point. It was
To Alan's point is something that might, I mean, it's fun to look at pedestrian or whatever the term, the astronomy, the astrology, and a lot of cultures take more to it. But the way my husband always wanted to describe it is reading the stars or the characteristics of these different horoscopes, like the different tribes, is kind of like the natural default. If you don't look at yourself, if you don't use any energy to reflect and grow and be your best self, that's kind of the proclivity of where you're going to end up. But it's not cast in stone. Vis-a-vis the same thing I'm just saying. Yom Kippur and all of that, there's always the chance to improve and to be redeemed. And I think that's the ultimate thing, that why we continue to have hope in the face of a lot of distress. And, one of the principal foundations of Jewish way of life.
thank you for bringing up the word hope. I don't know where that happened. It must be that I have something turned on here. Thank you for bringing in the word hope, because Alan, that is the answer that I am looking at for your concern there. So the idea that this idea of continuity, this idea of having generations to follow, is a promise. And it is the most ultimately hopeful act there is. Having children is the most hopeful human act. In the same book that I quoted from Pinchas Peli, he mentions that as far as he understands from study, from whatever scientific evidence is available, that the human species is the only one who has the ability to actually have a relationship with grandchildren. In the animal world, you see a lot of protective activity, the animal protecting their young. But the notion of recognizing that the offspring of the young, i.e. their own grandchildren, is not distinct anymore. It doesn't become like that's a human thing. But yet with that, the sins of the fathers cannot be carried beyond a certain length of time. It could be a very long time. But that each generation offers the hopefulness of a better future. And when I say that one of the things that worries me about American society today is that the generation that is my kids' generation is having fewer kids than ever. Some are having absolutely none by decision. And some are having one. And that's very common. And that to me is the most profound sign of lack of hopefulness in a society. So, yes, if we think that we have ruined the world so badly that we don't want to bring children into it, wow, what are we saying about ourselves? And we're actually saying, and we can't change it? What this parasha is telling us, no, we can't do it all in our time. But
and our leaders don't want to do it either. I mean, the young people see that we have a president who thinks that climate change is a hoax. The oceans have problems, the climate change, heating up. So young people see these things and they don't see the actual leaders wanting to do anything about it. In fact, they want to have more carbon pollution going into the air. So they're choosing not to have kids for those reasons, and you can't blame them. I mean, these are kids that believe the science.
But I
Thing
think
is,
what
talk about hope. All you need is one,
Mhm.
as long as there's a remnant, we're still a remnant, if we're not extinct yet as a species.
Well, I don't know if that's true about among Jews, though. I mean, Orthodox Jews are having plenty of kids. They're
So
not
are the
bothered by it at
non-Orthodox
all.
Jews.
I'm
The
sorry.
non-Orthodox Jews in Israel are having plenty of kids.
So that's not true of everybody, but it is true of a lot of, let's say, non-Jewish people. I don't know.
All our nieces and nephews have had 3 children.
Yeah.
Alan?
but this idea of this concern, I guess, if not an idea of predestination, that you're labeled a certain way and you can't change it, and that's that's the fear that I have when I see some of these descriptions where people say, oh, well, if you're from the house of Benjamin or the house of Reuben, this is what your fate is going to be. And I come back and listening to some of the comments brought to mind one of Shakespeare's most famous lines, Cassius saying that the fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves. And that's, I think, what it's saying is, or what we have to take from it, is that we have choices we can make.
That's exactly what I think the point is, and this cusp of the idea of when one generation dies, what are we giving to our next generation? So that's why I can't read these as blessings. I see them more as warnings,
Maybe.
like cautionary tales.
Mm.
But on the other hand, each one of those individual negative qualities on its own is one thing, but when you build an entire society around the strengths of certain people, then if those strengths, and this goes right back to what Ruth Ellen was alluding to, which we will touch upon, I'm sure, on Monday, is the what for of it all. Like the qualities that may have led Shimon and Levi to smite an entire city came from a place of fill in the blank. Do you think it was passion? Do you think they needed to prove their manhood? Or were they so affronted by what happened to their sister? All those things are true to somebody, right? Like all those are truths to somebody, but to what end? What is that truth for? So, not to be too overtly political, but are we naive to think that we're doing something really great for the poor oppressed people of Venezuela today? Or is it just a byproduct that some people are going to end up getting enriched by this inevitability?
Oil, all about oil.
All
Right.
that
So
oil. That's
you
right.
can't take that out of the way you think about it. I mean, not just as a Jew, as anybody, you can't look at that and do this and say, oh, they can't see me. It doesn't work. And I think that's what these supposed what are translated as blessings are about. They're cautionary, and they're not saying what you did in the past is so horrendous that you're not going to get a share in the world to come. It's not nothing. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about be wise about your actions. That's how I see it. I don't know. Matan, you had your hand up and I didn't call on you and your hand went down.
Okay. There is a tradition in the Middle East and also in South Asia where of honor. And I think what you're talking about basically is honor, and they felt like honor was taken from them with Dinah. and they had to redress that and get back their honor, which, it seems to me that's kind of toxic masculinity, but maybe that's just me.
All of that is true because you are who you are, reading the same story that someone else is reading. But why? The reason for you feeling that toxic masculinity plays a larger part is an important one in terms of preventing toxic masculinity from becoming normalized, right? So there's a reason for it. The reason that what you believe is true is because there's a reason for it. It's not just a personal affront to you or something that will make you look better so that you can start to dress like Shimon and Levi, and that would be a statement about you, because the statement should not be about you. The statement should be about society. So if you're protecting the honor of your family, protecting the honor of women, pointing out weaknesses in society, for example, toxic masculinity, which society is responsible for, by the way. So it's the reason why you think the things that you do. If you're thinking them in order to say the world could be a better place if people understood this concept, then it stands as a truth. But if you have an ulterior motive that only will gain something for yourself, then there's something questionable. Sorry, I'm not explaining it well. I kind of know what I mean, but it'll take me a few more years. In a few years, I'll be able to elaborate on that. Okay, Ruth Ellen, and then Yehuda.
Yehuda, is yours really time? Because this time I'm behind. I wrote notes, so if you want to go first, I'll let you.
Okay, this is my take. Is the most important part of that whole story is not what we're focusing on here. I'm going back to this, the through line. The through line is the promise. And the most important part of this story is that they put at risk, and the reason they don't actually receive the kind of blessing they probably should is because they put the promise at threat. That Jacob says, how could you do this? In effect, he's saying, we are strangers in a strange land. And you just went and you possibly messed up the promise. Because if they retaliated, we are a small little group of people, and you basically went in and you created murder and mayhem, and you put us at risk. I think that's the most important part of that whole story actually is that you can't just act the way Matan just mentioned, the honor. That doesn't work like that. The promise is a bigger thing than that.
I'm going to go back. There are two different points. One, the first thing where I'm talking to myself is when I want to assuage Alan's fear because I don't totally agree with him that just because it's set down that these are the proclivities that when you say then everybody says, well, that's it, I can't change. Unless what you meant by that is that's how people perceive it in themselves. That's the whole point. They shouldn't perceive it that way in themselves because they always have the choice to do differently. And now that brings me to Aviva's point that I understand about the next generation seeming to give up hope that scares you. First, for one, to a certain extent, I agree with you, but I think that's in our cultural milieu in the Western wealthy world that's not happening in every way. But to the degree it's true, it is because these children have lost hope and they've fallen into doing whatever entertains them endlessly, is because they have been failed by their elders vis-a-vis the Via Hafta and on my other way, the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, teach your children well, they have not felt equipped with the tools as a whole. Like I watch Jeopardy or I read some of these little, human interest things about people with climate change or even somebody who has a passion like what's her name, the youth from Sweden, Sternberg or whatever,
Greta Thunberg.
Yeah, that whether they can is the scariest part is because of the technology and the leadership taking over. It is that they're not going to have things will get out of control too fast, that the people who have some answers and who are willing to put themselves on the line to try to make those answers come true for the brighter society may end up being a little too late. But we can't go on that premise. We have to go on the premise that if they have the skills and have the ideas, the passion they'll have for it. That's also a proclivity in certain people to, I know in myself, I have all these ideas in my head and I'm coming out of them a little bit in my late blooming old age, but it's much easier and takes less energy to sit back and just, roll along. Even so, in some people, they just can't let themselves do that. They just must come forward. The kind of people like the woman who won the Nobel Peace Prize this year. For everyone like her, there are certainly people who believe her, like her, but would never take the risks that she took,
But then she's squashed. But then, that's what other people see is that, people who do step forward are quelled by
but
by
not
the
all,
people.
not all of them, and not always. And sometimes they can't see it because the steps they took do eventually create a turn, a switch in the road. What I'm thinking when I say that is, again, if we want to look everywhere, every place, all at once, I watched a documentary on Frontline looking back at the impact of the student movements to stop the Vietnam War and what Nixon did and all this stuff. And people in the 70s, they came out of that feeling defeated. We went into a period of relative insularism. And even the youth of America turned more inward. Like, again, when I was in college, I came right after this great flux of the student revolution, everything. And I came to school. Everybody teased me when I went to Brandeis, I was going to become a radical. And I think the backlash was, it was the most benign group of students they took in the next years. Just by example, I say that. But because they turned inward. But then when they looked further along and they gave the chronology and the arc of this whole story, in fact, what those impassioned young people primarily did in the 60s did have an impact on pushing
I know, but that was such
international
a different
policy. I can't
time.
remember all the details, but
That was such a different time, though, Ruth Ellen. I mean, people didn't own most of the world's wealth at that time. It's just a totally different time
it
than.
was always like that. Remember we said as GM goes, so goes the nation.
No, I don't remember that. I just think it was.
Oh yeah, that's what they said after post-World War II. Everybody looked at that. Now it's the tech giants. Nothing new under the sun. It's just, I guess I only want to keep having the hope that there's a critical mass of people who even if it takes being on the verge of destruction, which is often what it takes for people to get off their rusty dusty, that
it's the cyclical nature of the universe.
That's part of it too.
Let's read some more. I gotta go soon. You're muted, Aviva.
I misplaced my note about how far we're reading. I think we're reading, we can stop anywhere at line 6, 14, 21, or 26. So however much you want to read.
Do you want me to read?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And Joseph flung himself on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. And Joseph charged his servants and the physician to embalm his father, and the physicians embalmed Israel. And 40 full days were taken for him, as such is the full time of embalming. And the Egyptians keened for him 70 days. And the days of keening had passed, and Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh, saying, if pray I have found favor in your eyes, speak, pray in Pharaoh's hearing as follows. My father made me swear, saying, Look, I am about to die. The grave I have readied me in the land of Canaan. There you must bury me. And so let me go up, pray, and bury my father and come back. And Pharaoh said, Go up and bury your father, as he had made you swear. And Joseph went up to bury his father, and all Pharaoh's servants, the elders of his household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt went up with him. And the household of Joseph and his brothers, and the father's household, only the little ones and their flocks and their cattle they left in the land of Goshen. And the chariots and the horsemen as well went up with him, and the procession was very great. And they came as far as Goren HaAtad, which is across the Jordan. And there they keened a great and heavy keening, performed mourning rites for his father for 7 days. And the Canaanite natives of the land saw the mourning in Goren HaAtad, and they said, The heavy mourning is Egypt's. Therefore is the name called Abel Mizraim, which is across the Jordan. And his sons did for him just as he charged them. And his sons conveyed him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of Machpelah field. And field Abraham had brought as a burial holding from Ephron the Hittite, facing Mamre. And Joseph went back to Egypt, and he and his brothers and all had gone up with him to bury his father after he had buried his father. Everyone loves a parade, you know?
Yeah. Everyone loves a parade, that's for sure.
Oh, is that where the New Orleans funeral marches started from?
That's an interesting concept. Yeah, I don't know. The traditions of burial
That
are
was a
many.
joke. I think it's probably more from what Jesus following the Stations of the Cross and all that, on the way into Jerusalem. Probably has more to do with the marching. So,
You know, I read a really interesting thing. It is a little far afield from what we're discussing, but it came in with what Ruth Ellen said about the Christian Jewish tradition. You know, it was actually a podcast about when did the Jewish religion and Christian religion actually split? Was it a definite time period? And of course, it wasn't. They're saying in 600 AD, a Christian bishop made the proclamation that Christians could no longer fast on Yom Kippur. You know, so
That's not what it happened. It happened much earlier than that between two of the apostles. But between Peter and Paul. They
But they were
argued,
still doing it. They were still doing
they
it.
were
They were
still
still
doing it,
following
but you
Jewish
said,
customs way into the 7th century.
that's right, but it started with
And it was,
kashrut.
and even though the big impact was, of course, Constantine, you know, because he
Yeah,
made the whole Roman Empire Christian.
that was
But
huge.
before then, you couldn't say all of a sudden, you know, this is Christian and this is Jewish, because it was like, you know, all the sects of Judaism now. You know, you got the Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox, the Reform, the
But
Conservative.
that's not
They
true,
were,
Arnie.
it was true. It
It's
was a
not true
cult.
because the early Christians who were not called Christians, they were called believers. They were in hiding. Paul went from house to house, and Peter and
Okay.
Paul had a falling out about kashrut. Paul could not have gone to the Gentile and told them to be kosher. And Paul was against, and
I
Peter was.
agree with you, but they were
So I'm
still,
saying that that's where the beginning. I'm not talking. You're absolutely right. There are many other divisions after that, but you were saying where it started, and I'm telling you that that's where
no,
it started.
I didn't say that it started there. What I'm saying is no one knows exactly where it
Did you
started.
say where the
That's my
split
point.
started? I thought you
No,
said where
my
the.
point is there wasn't a date when it started that, you know, the early Christians were a cult of Judaism. That's my point.
The early people were Jews, but Paul went out to the Gentiles real early. I mean, it's
Yeah, I'm
in the
not
scripture.
arguing that. I'm not arguing with you on that. I agree.
And so that's where it really split, was over kashrut.
But
And
it
then
went
of
on.
course there was Constantine, but I mean Peter was beheaded in Rome. So, this happened very early on, that the people who became followers of Christ, I know because I studied all this thoroughly. Believe me. Believe me when I tell you, I had to figure out who that guy was, Jesus. And I have read and I've studied the scriptures intensely, the whole New Testament, verse by verse, for many years. And that's exactly where it started. Now, yeah, you're right. I mean, if you want to look at Constantine, which was 300, I don't know, 400 years later, whatever, 600 years later, but they were hiding from the early church. Paul himself, who was Saul, originally a Jew, but a Roman citizen, as many Jews were Roman citizens in that day, he went on the road to Damascus to preach, find followers, to get followers of Jesus. That's where he was headed. And he himself was persecuted. So that persecution and that split started, that's where it really began. Now, I agree with you that there were many other things that happened, but that's the original start of it.
Well, I agree with that. But that wasn't my point. And it's just saying it wasn't a definite on October 13th, 422, the official church was created and it was different than Judaism. I'm saying.
I guess the official church was created by Constantine
Right.
when he converted his thing. But like I said, the original church was house to house. That's when you read the letters of Paul, you see that he went to Corinth, he went to Thessalonica, he went to all these places, to people's houses.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I'm not arguing that point at all.
Okay.
I agree with you.
Okay, great.
I was just showing, my point was the early Christianity was just one more cult of Judaism, just like there's many cults of Judaism now, the Hasidim, the traditional, the Orthodox, the conservative, the Reformed, the Reconstructionists, they're all Jews, right?
Yeah, so was Jesus.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
going to object to the use of the term cult. Just because I studied cults
Sect.
and right, sects. I think I like
Sect
sects
is a
better.
better word,
But
yeah.
also in the context of there being times of prophets and prophecies, prophets are, think about this, prophets are successful when their prophecies fail. This comes straight from Rabbi Sachs. A prophet warns people if they don't mend their ways, this and that will happen. So they are successful when their prophecies fail. And it's very hard as Jews to have a conversation about the origins of Christianity, because in terms of the historical timeline, things fit right in. There was a time, and Jesus was a person, and he was a Jew. Now, the rest of the story is something where that road was not taken by our people. And so, it is a difficult conversation to have. There's beautiful writing that comes from that split, but there's something very in essence that redirects where another tradition started. And it's
Remember
not
when I was telling you about the Hasma, how it's
Hamsa, the
Yeah,
Hamsa.
how
Yeah.
it's a symbol in Buddhism, Muslim, and Jewish, and the Silk Road and the influence of Asia. Well, they've shown that Jesus' sayings were all said by the Buddha 600 years before him, so there was perhaps an exchange of cultures there that caused that. And I find that really interesting.
And perhaps there is a common theme that has to do with the condition of being human. Because that's kind of where I go with all of this. When I find complete wisdom in somebody else's culture or in different readings, that strengthens in me, not that we are a separate people, but that all people are equally people. I mean, that's clear to me that that's that the writing it down is not for the separating us from others. It's for finding the equalness of the, in our tradition, we say in the image, B'Tselem, that all humans are created in the image of God, therefore all humans are equally human. That's a basic concept, and it's not unique to us. It's written down and discussed for many generations, but it's not unique to us. And I think that that is what humans recognize about other humans, that we are equally human. Like, it doesn't matter what anyone else looks like. If you see them being physically hurt, you know what that feels like. That's a condition of being human. So if you say that the writings of fill in the blank, Jesus or Moses or anything have been coincidentally written thousands of years or hundreds of years apart in a different place where somebody would not have access to our personal history, our writings, it would do the opposite of surprise me. It would reinforce something. It wouldn't surprise me.
I find myself wondering, just to come back to the reading, what this procession, the impression that must have made. Here, this is the third generation of this family that has been buried at this location. So it doesn't seem like they come there very often. And to show up with wagons and animals and Egyptian dress and have a parade coming through and having all of this go on must have made some impression on the locals.
Yeah.
We don't get it from their point of view, but I can't imagine this looked like an everyday occurrence.
Right, and look at what didn't come with them.
Yeah.
The line right before you quoted line 9, line 8 says, they left in Goshen only their little ones, their flocks, and their cattle. They weren't running away. They weren't taking the riches. They left their young behind. They were definitely coming back.
Definitely.
Yeah. No, I agree, though. I mean, the origins of, anti-Semitism, which is kind of a hard one because Semites are a very all-inclusive category, which actually does not imply Jewish. But the concept of anti-Semitism already, that, like, how could it not look weird for people to be kind of starving and having to give away their lands, pay high taxes in order to just survive, and then the Bnei Israel are parading all their wealth? Yeah, I think that is a very, very bad image. It's troubling. So we didn't actually finish. There was a few more lines. And I'm sorry because I got distracted looking for that website. But if someone wants to take us out with the last, well, I don't know, 10 lines or so, or less.
I'll do it.
Sure. Thank you, Craig.
All right. And my dog too. And Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, and they said, if Joseph bears resentment against us, he will surely pay us back for all the evil we caused him. And they charged Joseph, saying, your father left a charge before his death, saying, thus shall you say to Joseph, we beseech you, forgive, pray, the crime and the offense of your brothers, for evil they have caused you. And so now forgive, pray, the crime of the servants of your father's God. And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. And his brothers then came and flung themselves before him and said, here we are, your slaves. And Joseph said, fear not, for am I instead of God? While you meant evil toward me, God meant it for good, so as to bring about at this very time keeping many people alive. And so fear not, I will sustain you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spoke to their hearts. And Joseph dwelled in Egypt, he and his father's household. and Joseph lived 110 years. And Joseph saw the third generation of sons from Ephraim, and the sons as well of Machir, son of Manasseh, were born on Joseph's knees. And Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, and God will surely single you out and take you up from this land to the land he promised to Isaac and to Jacob. And Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, when God indeed singles you out, you shall take up my bones from this place. And Joseph died 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt.
Chazak,
Chazak, Venit
Venit
Chazek.
Chazek. What does that mean?
Ah, good question. So,
We just followed you like we were in a cult or something. Go ahead.
well, it says, strengthen us, and let us strengthen each other. Venit chazek. So let us be strengthened by each other's
By
strength.
each other.
Right. And again, this could be a whole session on just those words right
Because
there.
I was just reading by Rabbi Sachs, the biggest threat to Jews are Jews themselves being against each other. I just read that, like his last, did you read it? His last thing, I think, or maybe I was looking at an old one, I don't know. But anyway, I thought that struck me. I thought that was so interesting. How does that happen?
It
Well-
is said that Jerusalem fell to the Romans because the Jews were arguing among themselves within the city.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's interesting. So we better be nice to each other.
Well, I think the strengthen each other is very multivariate, but when I think that when we say it in the context of just finishing a book of Torah, that we are saying that our strength comes through the unity of studying together. And there is no place in our tradition that says you arrive at one truth and then you're like, I get to sit on this. I figured it out and now I hold on to it forever because you know what?
That's the thing that I always think, because no matter how much I argue with another person, if they're Jewish, it's not like we're gonna get mad at each other. It's a discussion, three Jews, it's six opinion or whatever. You know, but I mean, like I used to have these discussions with Bob all the time, and we would really go at it and everything, but we never got mad or anything about it. And that's my experience mostly with my Jewish friends. Yeah, we can really have excited and spirited arguments, disagreements, I don't know, whatever. But when you walk away, it's not like you had an argument or something. Am I wrong?
Yeah, you are. I think
This is
you
a
are.
this
Am I
is a
wrong or am I
segue.
right?
This is a
Yeah.
segue into a Monday night session on Judaism 101. We're actually starting with this particular thing.
Really?
That basically what we do, as a group is we talk and we argue and we have opposing points of view, but we are still friends as a function of it. And maybe the friendship is the basis of having opposing points of view.
Well, that's it. Because aren't Jews seekers?
Sure.
That's the one thing that I always think. If you're a Jew, you're a seeker automatically.
Right. You ask questions.
You ask questions, and
like she just did, right?
Go ahead, Alan.
No, please, Craig.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Alan. That was funny.
To our earlier point, though, how do we know to ask questions? I mean, from as it starts being at the Seder when we're 2 years old or whatever, and that's the question. Back to that whole notion of what Aviva read in that essay about if the great grandparents of the people who suffered during the Holocaust physically hadn't inculcated those beliefs, tenets in their children and grandchildren, then they wouldn't be there to ask those questions anymore. So that's
How about Esau?
that's an existential question in a lot of ways.
How about Esau? Am I my brother's keeper? Wasn't there a question in the
not
garden?
Esau.
No, that's Cain and
Cain.
Abel.
That's
You mean
Cain and Abel. Yeah,
but
yeah,
still.
you're right.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
You're right.
It's all part
right.
and parcel of the same thing, if you ask
But
me.
what, isn't there a question in the Garden of Eden? Doesn't God ask a question?
Yes, he does. When we have our Seder here at the house every year, a number of years we've had a sign on the door that says, "Welcome to the Feast of Questions."
That's
And
beautiful.
every single little place setting at the table has a post-it with a question mark next to it. And the rule is at any time during the Seder, you can hold that up and we have to address your question on the spot.
Wow.
And isn't
Maybe
one of the four
one year? I like that.
isn't one of the four children's the one who just doesn't know to ask a question?
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And he's the one that you really need. He or she is the one that you really need to explain it all to.
All
That's
these are
part-
wonderful segues into the Judaism 101 session on Monday. Thank you for all the introduction here.
Hold on a minute. Craig was trying to speak. Craig, the floor.
I was intrigued by your talk about prophets, and then Alan about the ostentatiousness that might have offended people, because the Jews, in effect, were showing off their prophets, right? While these others had none. And you talked about the prophets whose prophecies aren't fulfilled. Would they then become non-prophets? I just wondered about that. And
NGOs.
more seriously about Jews can always have discussions. And I just think we're in a new age where AI and social media is dividing Jews and others, but it's also stuff that's going on in the world. I mean, I don't really feel like debating the appropriateness of the Israel Prize for Donald Trump. That just, it bothers me that Israel would give a prize to this guy. And I know it's probably Netanyahu and some others, but Trump is very popular in Israel, right? And
Well, yeah, because he's, you know,
I mean,
what-
how do we reconcile that?
no, because you have so many people against Israel down through the ages that when anybody has a leader, no matter what we think of him, who is pro-Israel, that is like a gift to a lot of Jews.
I think his popularity is more measured by him being the person who pushed the Hamas to release the hostages. And I think that's the main reason that he is so positive in Israel.
He was popular before that, Yehuda.
Yeah, but this is it, because that was his stumbling block.
Every Orthodox person I know from before he was reelected says he's the best president ever. The best president ever.
So
And this is even before the insurrection.
Well, we're not supposed to be talking politics during this group.
I'm not talking politics. I'm just saying what the truth is, not politically, if I believe that or not, or is it right or is it wrong. I'm just saying that he's been very popular from the get-go.
Now, I'm just making
And it
the
has
point
to
that
do with being pro-Israel.
And it's even a topic that gets shut down a little here too, which is okay, but it's going on, and it's in terms of the ostentatiousness or this selfishness that you have to measure a leader by how he does for his country, and is he benefiting the world as opposed to your little part of the world? You know what I mean? So I'm just disappointed about the short-sightedness of the Jewish people who are allegedly renowned for our wisdom, or maybe we're all wrong. Maybe I've got it wrong, but it's a difficult thing to discuss. And so when you brought up that Jews can talk about anything and it's not divisive, I don't know. I want to punch Stephen Miller in the face,
Oh, these are just Jews that I know. I totally agree with what you're saying.
I want to clarify, I mean, there's no way to not think about these things as we're talking here.
Right,
So
right.
it's all legit. And there is, historically, it's correct that Trump had garnered a lot of support among certain people. That's an indisputable fact. And it preceded the release of the hostages. That's a fact. What we should be looking at is the reason. What is it that we feel so powerless about that we can champion someone who clearly, in the greater picture, we should be questioning? That's the thing that's really disturbing.
The,
Is
th-
what
the
is
thing
it
is,
that's
the thing is never again. In a
that
nutshell, in a nutshell.
in a nutshell, the never again means something very specific. It can be used globally. It's like using the term Black Lives Matter, and then countering and saying, well, blue lives matter. Well, of course they do. But the fact that you have to, say something specific to that means that it's been missing. So by saying never again should be, if any worldwide truth exists, it should be never again. And then you can fill in whatever you're
Again,
never again.
Bibi's latest speech, he says, never again. If you're going to try to kill us, we're
Okay,
going to come after you.
but however, he is partaking of a tradition by saying that, by using that
Yes.
term, never
Yes.
again,
Yes.
in that way.
Yes.
He's doing something that is political.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
because never again pertains. It's just like when other entities use the word I can't think right now. I'm sorry.
It doesn't matter, Aviva.
Just a second.
The point I'm trying to make is that this is a speech, like I said, that I just heard yesterday. So this is current. This is being brought up politically.
It is current, and you're seeing a current use of an ancient tradition.
Yeah, that's right.
In a political way.
Exactly.
And you have to question, what is the general insecurity or lack of power that people feel, that they feel like that can be a motto they jump behind?
I mean, can you blame them?
I'm not
No,
looking
I'm
for
not.
blame.
This is a rhetorical question. I don't expect you to really answer
I understand, but what I'm saying is we need to examine what is behind that. That's the point. I'm really, really, really sticking to this because if we do nothing else, we
Could I just interject
sorry,
something?
I'm going to mute myself and listen to Arnie and
internet?
everybody else. I'm sorry.
Okay,
It's too much. I
so
can't
I
hear
just
you
wanna
just talk. I can't hear.
I want to say that as Jews, and remembering that we have to be political in our everyday life, we could keep the vision of my namesake, Yitzhak Rabin, instead of Bibi, as the true Jewish vision, and not feel like we're going against Israel when we say it, not feel guilty that we believe in justice for all people. And, it's terrible that they've created this feeling amongst us that we're betraying Israel and we're betraying Jews if we don't believe in this, you know? So I'm steadfast in my belief in a just world and a two-state solution. And I'm not sure how it's going to work out, but it's got to be good for everybody.
I think you have a lot of people here that agree with you.
Right. But I would say that your blessed memory of Yitzhak Rabin, his followers are probably having a lot fewer kids than the Orthodox are having. And thus, they're losing power in Israel to that contingent who feels that Rabin was not as great as you and I think he was.
Yeah, my only hope is now that the Haredim have to send their kids into the army and also get slaughtered, that things might change.
Do they?
Yeah, they just made that law that the Haredim's kids have to go in the army too.
No.
They're fighting it. Yes.
Wow.
Absolutely. And they're fighting it, but that's what's happening.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I
Why are
hate
you
to.
shaking your head, Aviva?
What
Why
was
are you
that?
shaking? Why are you shaking
No,
your head?
I'm trying to communicate by text, so I keep it, it's a little
Oh.
noisy. I'm keeping it muted.
Oh, I
Go ahead,
see.
Ruth Ellen.
I hate to steer us back toward the Torah for a moment, but I'm curious when you talked about the tradition of chazak v'nitazek
Yeah.
after the completion of a book. Does that relate to the Yasher Koach? That's also about strength that we wish on someone who has just had an aliyah. Is it related in some way?
I am sure it is, although I can't quote you on it, because the reference to the beast strength, to the strength, is related to studying Torah in this context. And the studying together, the nitchazek is the plural.
Mm-hmm.